Sarah Martinez had always been different. While other kids her age were playing video games or hanging out at the mall, she was in her grandfather's backyard, learning to shoot tin cans off fence posts with an old .22 rifle. Her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran, had seen something in her that others missed, a natural steadiness, an ability to block out the world and focus on a single point. Breathing is everything, Mija, he would tell her, his weathered hands guiding her small ones on the rifle. You don't fight your heartbeat. You work with it. Between beats, that's where the magic happens. By the time Sarah turned 18, she could hit a quarter from 200 yards. But when she walked into the Marine Corps recruiting station in downtown San Antonio, the recruiter barely looked up from his paperwork. She was 5'4", maybe 120 pounds soaking wet, with the kind of quiet demeanor that made people forget she was in the room. You sure you're in the right place, sweetheart? Sergeant Rodriguez asked, finally, glancing up. The community college has a really nice nursing program. Sarah placed her hand flat on his desk. I want to be infantry. I want to be a sniper. The recruiter laughed. Not a mean laugh, but the kind of chuckle reserved for kids who think they want to be astronauts or movie stars. Look, the Marines are changing, but sniper school, that's a different level. Maybe start with admin or supply. Good steady work, and you'll see the world. 3 other Marines in the office had stopped their conversations to listen. Sarah could feel their eyes on her, could practically hear their thoughts. Another small-town girl with big dreams and no idea what she was walking into. I can outshoot anyone in this room, she said quietly. I bet you can, darling, Rodriguez said, pulling out standard enlistment papers. But shooting paper targets and being in combat are 2 very different things. Sarah signed the papers anyway. She knew what she was capable of, even if nobody else did. Boot camp at Paris Island was exactly what she expected, brutal, designed to break you down and build you back up. But it was also where she first encountered the kind of dismissal that would follow her throughout her career. Her drill instructor, Staff Sergeant Williams, took one look at her during the first formation and shook his head. Martinez, did you get lost on your way to the Girl Scouts? The other recruits laughed. Sarah kept her eyes forward and her mouth shut. On the rifle range, something shifted. While other recruits struggled with their M16A4S, fighting the recoil and trying to find their natural point of aim, Sarah settled into her shooting position like she was coming home. Her first group at 200 yards measured less than 2 inches. Her second was even tighter. Staff Sergeant Williams walked over to examine her target, his permanent scowl deepening. Beginner's luck, he muttered. But Sarah shot the same way every day for 2 weeks. Tight groups, consistent performance, never showing off or making a big deal about it. The other recruits started to notice. A few began asking for tips. Others just stared. She's like a robot, one recruit whispered during chow. Doesn't even seem to breathe when she's shooting. Freaks me out, another added. It's not natural. Sarah pretended not to hear them. She'd been dealing with whispers her whole life. In high school, she'd been too quiet for the popular kids, too serious for the rebels, and too focused on shooting competitions for the academic crowd. She learned early that people were more comfortable when they could put you in a box, and she didn't fit in any of the standard categories. The moment that would define her reputation came during week 8 of boot camp. The company was doing combat marksmanship training, engaging targets at various distances while wearing full gear and fighting fatigue. It was designed to simulate combat stress, with drill instructors screaming instructions and time pressure making everyone rush their shots. Sarah was paired with Jenkins, a cocky kid from Alabama who'd been bragging about hunting deer since he was 10. He'd made several comments about city girls and how they'd fold under pressure. Bet you $5 Martinez doesn't hit more than half her targets, Jenkins announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. Soon as she hears those rounds cracking over her head, she'll be crying for her mama. Several recruits took the bet. Sarah said nothing. When the exercise began, chaos erupted. Simulated artillery sounds blasted from speakers, drill instructors yelled contradictory orders, and smoke grenades created a hazy, confusing environment. Targets popped up at random distances, some as close as 50 meters, others as far as 500. Jenkins rushed through his shots, firing rapidly and getting maybe 6 hits out of 20 targets. Most of the other recruits did similarly, overwhelmed by the sensory overload and time pressure. Sarah moved differently. She seemed to slow down as everything else sped up. Her breathing remained steady, her movements deliberate. She identified each target, found her natural point of aim, and fired once. 20 targets appeared during her run. She hit 19 dead center and missed the 20th by less than an inch, a target that had been obscured by smoke. The range fell silent when the scores were announced. Even Staff Sergeant Williams looked surprised. "Martinez, how'd you do that?" "Same way I always do it, Staff Sergeant." "Don't get smart with me, recruit." "I'm not being smart, Staff Sergeant. I just shoot the same way every time." That night in the barracks, the atmosphere was different. Some recruits looked at Sarah with new respect. Others seemed almost resentful, like she'd cheated somehow by being that good. "It's not normal," Jenkins muttered to his bunkmates. "Nobody shoots like that under pressure. Not without training." "Maybe she had training," suggested Wilson, a quiet kid from Oregon. "Where?" "The Girl Scouts." But word of Sarah's performance spread beyond her platoon. Drill instructors from other companies started showing up to watch her shoot. Senior Marines began asking questions about the quiet recruit who was out shooting people with years of experience. Chief Warrant Officer Thompson, the base's senior marksmanship instructor, made a special trip to observe Sarah during a qualification shoot. He stood behind the firing line, saying nothing, just watching as she ran through the standard Marine Corps rifle qualification course. When she finished, he walked over to examine her target. Every shot was in the X-ring. Not just good scores, but precision that bordered on mechanical. "Martinez, where'd you learn to shoot?" "My grandfather taught me, Chief." "He military?" "Vietnam. Army." Thompson nodded slowly. "You interested in advanced marksmanship?" "Yes, Chief. Scout Sniper School is opening applications next month. It's volunteer only, and most volunteers don't make it." "You interested?" Before Sarah could answer, Staff Sergeant Williams stepped in. "Chief, with all due respect, Martinez is a good shot, but Scout Sniper School? That's a different level of commitment. Different level of stress." "I've seen her under stress," Thompson replied. "She shoots better when things get chaotic, not worse. But the physical requirements, the mental pressure, the advanced fieldcraft. Are we having this conversation because she's small, or because she's a woman?" The question hung in the air. Williams looked uncomfortable. "Chief, that's not what I'm saying." "Then, what are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe she should get some regular Marine experience first. Learn the basics before jumping into something that advanced." Sarah had remained at attention throughout this conversation, but Thompson turned to her. "Martinez, you have something to say?" "Chief, I've been shooting since I was 8 years old. I've been hunting, competing in matches, and training in fieldcraft with my grandfather since I was 12. I know I'm not what people expect when they think of a sniper, but I can do the job." "The failure rate is over 70%, Williams added. "And that's for Marines with combat experience." "Then, I'll be in the 30% that makes it," Sarah said simply. Thompson smiled. It was the first time anyone had seen him smile in years. "Application goes in tomorrow, Martinez. Start preparing." That night, the barracks was buzzing with conversation. Some recruits were excited for Sarah, others thought she was crazy, and a few seemed genuinely angry that she was even being considered for something so elite. "This is bullshit," Jenkins said, not bothering to lower his voice. "They're just doing it for the publicity. First female sniper. All that political correctness garbage." "Maybe she's just that good," Wilson suggested. "Nobody's that good without some kind of advantage. I bet she's got connections. Bet her grandfather pulled some strings." Sarah lay on her bunk, listening to them argue about her, as if she wasn't there. She'd heard variations of this conversation her entire life. People trying to explain away her abilities because they didn't fit their expectations. What they didn't understand was that Sarah had never wanted to be special. She just wanted to be good at something that mattered. Shooting was the one thing that made sense to her, the one place where all the noise in her head went quiet and everything became clear. The next morning, Chief Thompson found her on the range during personal time, practicing with iron sights on her M16. "Martinez, you know what you're getting into." "I think so, Chief. Scout Sniper School isn't just about shooting. It's about invisibility, about living in the field for weeks, about making shots that matter when people's lives depend on it. It's about being alone with your thoughts for hours at a time while you wait for the right moment." "I understand, Chief." "Do you?" "Because once you submit that application, you're going to have a target on your back. Every instructor, every other student, they're going to be watching for you to fail. Some of them are going to want you to fail." Sarah lowered her rifle and looked at him. "Chief, with respect, people have been expecting me to fail my entire life. I'm used to it. This is different. This is the Marine Corps. This is tradition and brotherhood, and a whole lot of people who think women don't belong in combat roles. Then, I'll have to prove them wrong. Thompson studied her for a long moment. Your grandfather, what did he teach you about being a sniper? That it's not about the shot you make, it's about the 100 shots you don't make. That patience is more important than skill. That the best snipers are the ones nobody ever sees or hears about. Smart man. What else? That the weapon doesn't make the sniper. The mind does. And that if you're doing your job right, you prevent more violence than you cause. Thompson nodded approvingly. One more thing, Martinez. In sniper school, they're going to try to break you down psychologically. They're going to put you in situations designed to make you quit. They're going to make you question everything about yourself. I'm ready, Chief. Are you? Because the physical training is just the beginning. The real challenge is staying focused when everyone around you is telling you that you don't belong, that you're not good enough, that you're just there to fill a quota. Sarah shouldered her rifle again, settling into her shooting position. Chief, I've been the only girl on boys' shooting teams since I was 14. I've had coaches who didn't want me there, teammates who resented me, and competitors who thought beating me would be easy. I've learned not to listen to what people say. I listen to what the target tells me. She fired a single shot at a target 200 meters away. Dead center. The target doesn't care if I'm a man or woman, tall or short, quiet or loud. It only cares if I can make the shot when it matters. Thompson watched her fire 4 more rounds, each one perfectly placed. Application goes in today, Martinez. Hope you're ready for what comes next. As he walked away, Sarah remained in position, firing slowly and methodically. Each shot was a statement, a declaration of intent. She might be quiet, she might not fit the traditional mold, but she was going to make it through sniper school. What she didn't know was that her reputation was already spreading beyond Paris Island. Instructors at the Scout Sniper School had heard about the quiet recruit who shot like a machine and never showed emotion. Some were curious, others skeptical, and a few were already planning to make her life as difficult as possible. But Sarah had learned something important from her grandfather's stories about Vietnam. The best warriors weren't the loudest or the biggest or the ones who fit the stereotype. They were the ones who could stay calm when everything fell apart, who could make the hard shots when lives depended on it, and who never quit when things got difficult. She packed her sea bag that night knowing that the real test was just beginning. Boot camp had been preparation. Scout Sniper School would be the proving ground where she'd either earn her place among the Corps' elite or wash out like so many others before her. Either way, she was going to find out exactly what she was made of. The Scout Sniper School at Camp Pendleton was nothing like boot camp. Where Paris Island had been about breaking down civilians and building Marines, this place was designed to separate the elite from the merely excellent. Of the 42 Marines who arrived for the 3-month course, Sarah was the only woman. Gunnery Sergeant Morrison, the chief instructor, made that clear during the first formation. He was a barrel-chested man with scars on his hands, and the kind of 1,000-yard stare that came from multiple combat deployments. Gentlemen, he said, deliberately emphasizing the word while looking directly at Sarah. Welcome to the most demanding school in the Marine Corps. Over the next 12 weeks, we're going to strip away everything you think you know about yourself and rebuild you into something the enemy fears. The other students were all experienced Marines, infantrymen with combat deployments, recon Marines, even a few force recon operators. Sarah was the youngest by 3 years and the least experienced by far. Martinez, Morrison called out. Front and center. Sarah stepped forward, maintaining perfect military bearing despite feeling 41 pairs of eyes boring into her. Marines, meet your classmate. Lance Corporal Martinez here thinks she has what it takes to be a scout sniper. What do you think about that? Silence. The kind of heavy, uncomfortable silence that spoke louder than words. I asked you a question. What do you think? Finally, Sergeant Davis, a combat veteran from Iraq, spoke up. Gunnery Sergeant, I think we'll find out soon enough. Morrison smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Yes, we will. Martinez, you know what the failure rate is for this course. 73%, Gunnery Sergeant. That's right. And do you know why it's so high? Because being a sniper requires more than just shooting ability, Gunnery Sergeant. Exactly. It requires physical endurance, mental toughness, and the ability to work as part of a 2-man team under extreme stress. It requires sleeping in your own filth for days at a time, moving through enemy territory without being detected, and making life-or-death decisions with incomplete information. He stepped closer to Sarah, close enough that she could smell his coffee breath. It requires strength that goes beyond muscle, Martinez. Do you have that strength? I believe so, Gunnery Sergeant. Belief isn't enough here. We deal in reality. And the reality is that this course has broken men who've been through multiple combat deployments. Men who've seen things that would give normal people nightmares for life. Sarah kept her eyes forward. Understood, Gunnery Sergeant. We'll see. The first week was designed to establish baseline fitness and eliminate anyone who wasn't serious. 6-mile runs in full gear, obstacle courses, endless calisthenics, and marathon classroom sessions on ballistics, weather effects, and target analysis. Sarah struggled with some of the physical requirements. She could run forever, and her endurance was solid. But when it came to pure upper body strength, several of the bigger Marines had clear advantages. During rope climbing and pull-up competitions, she had to work twice as hard to keep up. She's gonna wash out by week 3, predicted Corporal Jackson, a massive Marine from Texas who'd been an all-state football player before enlisting. Just look at her trying to do those pull-ups. This ain't about being politically correct. But Sarah surprised them during the stalking exercises. Sniper training wasn't just about shooting. It was about getting into position without being detected, sometimes crawling for miles through terrain where the smallest mistake meant failure. The first stalking exercise was a nightmare for most students. They had to move 600 meters across open ground while instructors with high-powered spotting scopes tried to detect them. The goal was to get within 200 meters of the target and set up a firing position without being seen. Of the 42 students, only 8 successfully completed the stalk on their first attempt. Sarah was one of them. She moved like smoke, using every piece of microterrain to mask her movement. While other Marines tried to rush across open areas, Sarah took 3 hours to cover the distance, moving so slowly that even the trained watchers had trouble spotting her. How'd she do that? Jackson muttered as the successful students were announced. She just disappeared. Sergeant Davis, who'd also completed the stalk successfully, nodded thoughtfully. My grandfather was Cherokee. Used to tell stories about how his people could move through the forest like ghosts. Maybe some folks just have that natural ability. The second week brought precision shooting requirements that separated the good marksmen from the potential snipers. Students had to engage targets at ranges from 300 to 1,000 meters, adjusting for wind, temperature, humidity, and elevation changes. This was Sarah's element. While other Marines struggled with the complex calculations and environmental factors, she seemed to have an intuitive understanding of how conditions affected bullet trajectory. Watch this, Instructor Staff Sergeant Williams said to his fellow instructors as Sarah prepared for an 800-meter shot in challenging crosswind conditions. She doesn't even use the formula cards, just looks at the grass and makes her adjustments. Sarah settled behind the M40A3 sniper rifle, a weapon she'd been dreaming of using since her first conversation with Chief Thompson. The wind was gusting from the left at approximately 15 miles per hour, with occasional stronger gusts. Most students had been struggling with the conditions all morning. She watched the grass, the mirage patterns in the distance, even the way dust moved across the range. Then, she made her adjustments and fired. Bullseye. Jesus, whispered one of the instructors. Wind shifted right as she fired, and she compensated perfectly. She fired 4 more rounds at different targets. All hits, all within the scoring rings that would earn her a passing grade. But technical skill wasn't everything. The instructors were watching for signs that she couldn't handle the psychological pressure that came with the job. That test came during week 4, in the form of the stalking gauntlet. Students had to move through a course while instructors actively hunted them with spotting scopes. If you were detected, you failed the exercise and received penalty points toward your final grade. The twist was that each student was also responsible for their teammates' performance. If your partner was detected, you both received penalty points. Sarah was paired with Corporal Thompson, a quiet Marine from Montana who'd been respectful but distant since the course began. He was a solid performer, but not spectacular at any particular skill. Look, Martinez, he said during their planning session, no offense, but I need to graduate from this course. I've got a family back home, and sniper qualification means promotion points and better assignments. I understand, Sarah replied. Do you? Because if you screw this up, you're taking me down with you. And I've got too much riding on this to let that happen. Sarah looked at him steadily. I won't let you down. The stalking gauntlet was brutal. 600 meters of open ground with minimal cover, multiple instructors actively searching for movement, and a time limit that forced students to take risks. Thompson moved first, using a drainage ditch to cover most of his approach. Sarah watched from their starting position, noting where the instructors were focusing their attention and identifying dead spaces in their observation. When her turn came, she took a completely different approach. Instead of using the obvious terrain features that other students had been caught in, she moved along the military crest of a small ridge, using shadows and vegetation to break up her outline. It took her 45 minutes to move 300 meters, but when she reached the designated firing position, none of the instructors had spotted her. Thompson had also made it successfully, and they were preparing to extract when disaster struck. Another team, moving carelessly through an area Sarah had identified as dangerous, triggered a response from the instructors. In the confusion, Thompson panicked and moved too quickly across an open area. Sarah saw the instructor's spotting scope swing toward his position and realized he was about to be detected. Without thinking, she deliberately exposed herself, drawing the instructor's attention away from Thompson's position. The instructor spotted her immediately, giving her team a failure for the exercise. "Martinez," the instructor called over the radio. "You're blown. Exercise complete." That night, Thompson found Sarah cleaning her rifle in the barracks. "Why'd you do that?" he asked. "Do what?" "You know what. You drew fire so I could get away. Cost us both the exercise." Sarah continued cleaning her weapon. "We're partners. Partners don't let each other fail. But you could have made it through clean. Your career could have benefited from having a perfect score on that exercise. My career isn't more important than doing the right thing." Thompson sat down across from her. "You know what the others are saying about you, right? I can guess. Some think you're just here for the publicity. Others think you're going to wash out as soon as things get really difficult. A few respect your shooting, but they're waiting to see how you handle the pressure." Sarah looked up from her rifle. "What do you think?" "I think you just proved something important. I think you showed that you understand what being part of a team really means." Word of the stalking exercise spread through the student body. Some Marines began looking at Sarah differently, not as a curiosity or a political statement, but as someone who would have their back when things went bad. Others, however, became more resentful. "She's getting special treatment," Jackson complained loudly in the chow hall. "Any of us pulled a stunt like that, we'd be out of here." "What stunt?" asked Davis. "Drawing attention to herself like that. Making a big show of being heroic. It's all for the cameras." "What cameras?" Thompson said, joining the conversation. "And how is taking a failure to help your partner special treatment?" The tension came to a head during week 6, in an exercise designed to test students' ability to work under extreme stress. Each team had to spend 72 hours in the field, living off minimal rations while conducting simulated surveillance missions. Sarah was paired with Sergeant Collins, a Marine who'd made no secret of his opinion that women didn't belong in combat roles. "Just stay out of my way and follow orders," he told her bluntly. "I'll handle the real work." The mission required them to establish a hide site overlooking a simulated enemy position and report on activities for 3 days straight. They had to remain undetected while gathering intelligence and calling in coordinates for artillery strikes. Collins chose their position, a small depression on a hillside with decent fields of observation, but poor concealment. Sarah suggested an alternative location that offered better cover, but Collins dismissed her input. "I've been doing this longer than you've been a Marine," he said. "We're using my site." By the second day, their position had been compromised. Enemy forces, played by other Marines, had spotted signs of their presence and were actively searching the area. "We need to move," Sarah whispered during a brief moment when the searchers were out of sight. "Negative. We hold position." "Collins, they know we're here. They're going to find us." "I said hold position. That's an order." Sarah watched the search teams getting closer, knowing that detection would mean failure for both of them. Collins seemed paralyzed by indecision, unwilling to admit his chosen position had been wrong. When the search team was less than 50 meters away, Sarah made a decision. She began slowly backing out of their position, gathering their equipment as quietly as possible. "What are you doing?" Collins hissed. "Saving our mission." She led them to the alternate position she'd identified earlier, a location that offered perfect concealment and equally good observation of the target area. Collins followed reluctantly, clearly angry about being overruled. From their new position, they successfully completed the remaining surveillance requirements while the search teams continued looking for them in their old location. The exercise concluded with both teams receiving passing grades, but Collins was furious. "You disobeyed a direct order," he confronted Sarah afterward. "I prevented mission failure. You undermined my authority as team leader. Your authority was about to get us both eliminated from the course." The confrontation attracted attention from other students and instructors. Gunnery Sergeant Morrison appeared, having heard raised voices. "Problem here." Collins hesitated, realizing that complaining about Sarah's initiative would mean admitting his own poor decision-making. "No problem, Gunnery Sergeant," he finally said. "Good. Because the enemy doesn't care about your personal issues. They care about results. And, from what I observed, Martinez's decision-making prevented mission failure." That night, the atmosphere in the barracks was tense. Some students clearly supported Sarah's actions, while others saw them as insubordinate. "She's not following the chain of command," one Marine argued. "What happens in combat when she decides she knows better than her team leader? What happens when her team leader makes stupid decisions that get people killed?" Thompson countered. The debate might have continued, but it was interrupted by an announcement over the barracks loudspeaker. "All students report to the classroom immediately. Full utilities, no cover." The students assembled quickly, wondering what emergency could require an immediate formation at 2,200 hours. Gunnery Sergeant Morrison stood at the front of the room, his expression unreadable. "Marines, we have a visitor. Someone who wanted to meet the current class and observe your training." A figure stepped out of the shadows, a tall, lean man in utilities with the silver eagle of a full colonel on his collar. But these weren't standard Marine utilities. They were Navy utilities. "Marines," Morrison continued, "I present Colonel James Richardson, commanding officer of SEAL Team 3. The room went dead silent. SEAL Team commanders didn't just drop by Marine sniper school for casual visits. Colonel Richardson stepped forward, his eyes scanning the assembled students. When his gaze reached Sarah, it paused for a moment before moving on. "Marines, I'm here because my teams work closely with Marine Scout snipers in combat operations. Your reputation for precision and reliability makes you invaluable assets in joint operations." He began walking among the students, examining them like he was inspecting equipment. "I've been following the progress of this class with interest, particularly the performance of certain individuals who've demonstrated exceptional skills under pressure." His eyes found Sarah again, and this time they stayed there. Lance Corporal Martinez stepped forward. The room seemed to hold its collective breath as Sarah moved to the front of the formation. What could a SEAL colonel want with a Marine who hadn't even graduated sniper school yet? "Martinez, I've been reviewing your performance records. Exceptional shooting, superior fieldcraft, and, according to your instructors, the ability to make sound tactical decisions under pressure." Sarah maintained her position of attention, saying nothing. "I also understand you face some resistance from your peers. Some question whether you belong in this elite community." The silence in the room was absolute. Every student was hanging on the colonel's words. Colonel Richardson turned to address the entire class. "Marines, let me tell you something about combat. The enemy doesn't care about your preconceptions or your personal biases. They care about who can make the shot when it matters." He walked back to Sarah. "Martinez, are you familiar with Operation Red Wings?" "Yes, sir. Afghanistan, 2005. SEAL reconnaissance mission that went bad." "That's right. 4 SEALs inserted to gather intelligence on a high-value target. The mission was compromised, and 3 of the 4 team members were killed in the resulting firefight." Sarah knew the story. It had become legendary in special operations circles. "What you might not know," the colonel continued, "is that the mission might have had a different outcome if we'd had proper sniper overwatch. If we'd had someone positioned to provide precision fire support when things went wrong." He paused, letting that sink in. "The point, Marines, is that in combat, your preconceptions about who looks like a warrior can get people killed. I've served with female snipers from other allied forces, Israelis, Norwegians, even a few from Eastern European countries. Some of the most effective shooters I've ever worked with." He turned back to Sarah. "I've also served with Marines who looked like recruiting posters, but couldn't hit the broadside of a barn when the pressure was on." The colonel addressed the entire class again. "Your instructors tell me that Martinez here has never missed a shot when it mattered. Not once. She's completed every stalking exercise successfully, demonstrated superior tactical thinking, and shown the kind of selfless teamwork that keeps people alive in combat." Several students shifted uncomfortably. The colonel's words were clearly aimed at those who had been questioning Sarah's presence in the course. So when I hear that some of you question whether she belongs here, I wonder if you understand what this job is really about. Colonel Richardson walked to the center of the room. Being a sniper isn't about meeting someone's expectation of what a warrior should look like. It's about having the skill to make impossible shots and the judgment to know when not to take them. It's about patience, precision, and the mental strength to carry the weight of life and death decisions. He looked directly at Jackson, who had been one of Sarah's most vocal critics. Corporal Jackson, you're a big, strong Marine. Impressive physical specimen. How many stalking exercises have you failed? Jackson's face reddened. 3, sir. And Martinez? 0, sir. Jackson admitted reluctantly. Interesting. The colonel's tone was perfectly neutral, but the implication was clear. He addressed the class one final time. Marines, you're training to become part of an elite brotherhood. That brotherhood isn't defined by gender, size, or background. It's defined by competence, reliability, and the willingness to put mission success above personal comfort. Colonel Richardson nodded to Gunnery Sergeant Morrison and headed toward the door. But, before leaving, he turned back to the assembled students. One more thing. The best snipers I've ever worked with all shared one characteristic. They were underestimated by their enemies. Sometimes being unexpected is the greatest tactical advantage of all. After the colonel left, the barracks was unusually quiet. Students went about their evening routines without the usual chatter and debates. Sarah was cleaning her gear when Thompson approached her. That was something, he said quietly. What was? Having a SEAL colonel show up just to make a point about respecting your abilities. Sarah looked up from her rifle cleaning kit. You think that's what it was about? What else could it have been? Guy like that doesn't just drop by to give pep talks to sniper students. Sarah considered this. The colonel's visit had indeed seemed unusual, and his comments had been surprisingly specific about her performance and the challenges she'd faced. Maybe he just wanted to observe the training, she said finally. Thompson smiled. Martinez, you really don't get it, do you? Get what? Word travels fast in the special operations community. Your shooting scores, your performance in field exercises, the way you handled the stalking gauntlet. People are talking about you. Important people. Sarah felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. She'd worked hard to earn respect through performance, but attention from senior officers could be a double-edged sword. The remaining weeks of sniper school would test everything she'd learned about handling pressure, both from the training itself and from the expectations now being placed on her shoulders. The final phase of sniper school was designed to break students who had made it through everything else. Week 10 brought the culminating field exercise, a 7-day mission that combined every skill they'd learned into a single, high-pressure scenario. Students were divided into teams and given real-world-based missions requiring them to infiltrate enemy territory, establish observation posts, and engage targets while evading capture. The enemy was played by experienced Marines who knew every trick students might try. Sarah was paired with Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, a combat veteran who'd initially been skeptical of her abilities, but had gradually come to respect her skills. Their mission was to eliminate a high-value target who would be moving between 3 locations over the course of 5 days. The challenge was that they wouldn't know which location or what time until they were already in position. They had to establish hides that could observe all 3 sites simultaneously while remaining undetected by aggressive counter-sniper teams. This is going to be rough, Rodriguez told her as they studied aerial photos of their assigned area. Terrain's mostly open, minimal cover, and the instructors have been running this scenario for years. They know every hiding spot. Sarah examined the maps and photos carefully. The 3 target locations formed a triangle roughly 2 kilometers across. Traditional sniper doctrine would suggest finding a central position that could observe all 3, but the terrain made that nearly impossible without being exposed. What if we don't try to watch all 3 locations, she suggested. That's the mission requirement. No, the mission requirement is to eliminate the target. We don't have to watch all 3 locations if we can predict which one he'll use. Rodriguez looked at her skeptically. How do we predict something the instructors haven't told us? Sarah pointed to the aerial photos. Look at the access routes. 2 of these locations require the target to cross open ground to reach them. The third has covered approaches from 3 different directions. So if you're a high-value target worried about snipers, which location would you choose? Rodriguez studied the photos again. The one with multiple escape routes. Exactly. And if we position ourselves to cover that location specifically, we can choose a hide site with much better concealment. It was a risky strategy. If they were wrong about the target's location, they'd fail the entire exercise. But if they were right, they'd have a significant tactical advantage. They chose a position on a ridge overlooking the most secure target location, spending 2 full days constructing a hide that was virtually invisible from more than 50 meters away. They used natural vegetation, careful earth movement, and precise camouflage techniques to create a firing position that looked like undisturbed terrain. On the third day, the waiting began. This was the part of sniper training that eliminated more students than physical challenges or shooting skills. The mental stress of lying motionless for hours, maintaining focus while dealing with discomfort, boredom, and the constant fear of discovery. Rodriguez handled it well, but Sarah seemed to enter a different state entirely. She could remain perfectly still for hours, her breathing so shallow it was barely perceptible, her eyes constantly scanning their area of responsibility without seeming to move. "How do you do that?" Rodriguez whispered during one of their brief communication windows. "Do what? Stay that still. I've been watching you, and sometimes I can't even tell if you're breathing." Sarah smiled slightly. "My grandfather used to take me hunting when I was little. We'd sit in blinds waiting for deer for hours at a time. He taught me that patience isn't just waiting. It's becoming part of the environment. Like meditation, sort of. You stop fighting the discomfort and just accept it. You stop thinking about time passing and just exist in the moment." On the fourth day, their gamble paid off. The target appeared at the location they'd predicted, moving with a small security detail exactly as Sarah had anticipated. But there was a problem. The target was only exposed for brief moments as he moved between covered positions. Most sniper students would have taken a hasty shot at the first opportunity, but Sarah recognized that patience would give her a better chance. "I don't have a clear shot," she whispered to Rodriguez. "He's right there. Maybe 400 meters. Partial concealment, moving target, and his security team is actively scanning for threats. If I miss, we blow our position and fail the exercise. If you don't shoot, he might not give us another opportunity." Sarah continued watching through her scope. The target's movement pattern was becoming clear. He was checking 3 different observation points along the ridgeline, spending about 2 minutes at each position before moving to the next. "He's going to the far observation point next," she predicted. "When he does, he'll be exposed for about 10 seconds crossing the open area." "You sure?" "I'm sure." They waited. 3 minutes later, the target appeared exactly where Sarah had predicted, moving across the open ground toward the final observation point. Sarah's shot was perfect. A clean hit at 450 meters on a moving target, with wind conditions that had been shifting all day. "Target down," Rodriguez reported over the radio. "Outstanding shot, Martinez," came the response from the exercise controller. "Mission complete." But the exercise wasn't over. They still had to extract from their position and reach the pickup point without being captured by the hunter teams that were actively searching for them. This was where Sarah's fieldcraft skills proved most valuable. She led them on a route that avoided all the obvious exit paths, using terrain features and timing their movement to avoid patrols. When they finally reached the extraction point, they found 3 other teams already captured. Only Sarah and Rodriguez had successfully completed both the shooting mission and the evasion requirement. "How do you know which route to take?" Rodriguez asked as they waited for pickup. "Same as the shooting. You watch, you think, and you don't rush into bad decisions." The final week of the course was administrative, equipment turn-in, final examinations, and graduation preparation. Of the 42 Marines who had started the course, only 13 remained. Sarah was not only among them, but she had finished with the highest overall scores in the class. Gunnery Sergeant Morrison called her into his office the day before graduation. "Martinez, sit down." She took the chair across from his desk, wondering if this was about some administrative detail she'd missed. 12 weeks ago, I wasn't sure you belonged here," Morrison began. "I thought you might be here to prove a point, or because someone wanted to make a statement about equality." Sarah waited for him to continue. "I was wrong. You've proven that you belong here based on merit, not politics. Your shooting scores speak for themselves, but more importantly, you've demonstrated the kind of judgment and tactical thinking that keeps Marines alive in combat." "Thank you, Gunnery Sergeant. I'm not finished. Your performance has been so exceptional that it's attracted attention beyond this school. There are people interested in your career development. What kind of people? The kind who run special operations units that most Marines never hear about. Morrison pulled a folder from his desk drawer. You're being offered an assignment that doesn't officially exist. A joint unit that provides precision fire support for operations that require absolute discretion. Sarah felt her heart rate increase. What kind of operations? The kind where failure isn't an option and success is never publicly acknowledged. The kind where you might be the only thing standing between a special operations team and disaster. He handed her the folder. This is completely voluntary. You could take a standard assignment to a regular Marine unit and have a perfectly successful career. But if you're interested in pushing your limits and working with the absolute best. Sarah opened the folder. Most of the contents were classified at levels she'd never seen before, but she could see enough to understand that this was an opportunity few Marines ever received. How long do I have to decide? 24 hours. But, Martinez, understand what you'd be getting into. This isn't regular military service. This is a level of commitment and risk that most people can't handle. That evening, Sarah called her grandfather from a payphone outside the base exchange. Mija, how did the training go? I graduated, abuelo. Top of the class. I'm proud of you. Your grandmother would be proud too. Sarah hesitated before continuing. They're offering me a special assignment. Something that involves working with elite units on classified operations. There was silence on the other end of the line for a long moment. What does your heart tell you? Her grandfather finally asked. That this is what I've been training for my entire life. Then, you already know your answer. But it's dangerous, abuelo. More dangerous than regular military service. Mija, let me tell you something I learned in Vietnam. The most dangerous thing you can do is waste the gifts God gave you. You were born to be a protector, to use your skills to keep others safe. If you turn away from that calling because you're afraid, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Sarah knew he was right. Every challenge she'd faced, every person who'd doubted her abilities, every obstacle she'd overcome had been preparing her for this moment. The graduation ceremony was small and private. Family members weren't invited. The nature of Scout sniper training required operational security that precluded public recognition. But Colonel Richardson was there. After the ceremony, he approached Sarah privately. Congratulations, Lance Corporal. I hear you finished first in your class. Thank you, sir. I also hear you've been offered an interesting assignment opportunity. Sarah was surprised. How did you? Let's just say certain communities stay in close communication. Have you made your decision? I think so, sir. Good. Because I can tell you from personal experience that opportunities like this don't come along often. The unit you'd be joining works with my teams on a regular basis. He paused, seeming to consider his words carefully. Martinez, when I visited your class a few weeks ago, it wasn't just a social call. My teams have been requesting better sniper support for high-risk operations. When I heard about a Marine sniper candidate who shot like a machine and never cracked under pressure, I wanted to see for myself. Sir, what I saw was someone who could help save a lot of lives in the kind of operations my people conduct. Someone who could be the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Sarah felt the weight of what he was saying. This wasn't just about her career anymore. It was about being part of something larger than herself. Sir, I've made my decision. I want the assignment. Colonel Richardson smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. Report to Camp Pendleton, Building 1567, Monday morning at 0800. Ask for Major Davidson. And Martinez. Yes, sir. Welcome to the silent service. From now on, your successes will never be publicly acknowledged, but the people you save will go home to their families. That night, Sarah packed her gear for the last time at the Scout Sniper School. Her classmates were heading to regular Marine units around the world, but she was heading into a shadow world that few people knew existed. As she folded her uniforms, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From a quiet girl shooting tin cans in her grandfather's backyard to a Marine sniper being recruited for classified operations. It seemed impossible, but every step had led logically to the next. The mocking voices that had followed her throughout training seemed distant now. The recruiter who'd suggested nursing school, the drill instructor who'd called her shooting beginner's luck, the students who'd bet she wouldn't make it through the pressure. They'd all been proven wrong by the simple act of consistent performance under pressure. Sarah Martinez had never wanted to prove anything to anyone. She just wanted to be good at something that mattered. But in becoming the sniper she'd dreamed of being, she'd also become something else. living proof that warriors come in all forms, and that the quiet ones are often the most dangerous. When Monday morning came, she walked into Building 1567 with the same quiet confidence she'd carried into every challenge so far. She didn't know exactly what lay ahead, but she knew she was ready for it. Major Davidson was waiting for her, along with 2 other Marines she didn't recognize, and a civilian who had the unmistakable bearing of former military. "Martinez, welcome to Task Force Shadow. Have a seat, and we'll brief you on your new assignment." As Sarah took her place at the conference table, she realized that this was just the beginning. Everything up to this point had been preparation. Now the real work would begin. Outside the classified briefing room, the Marine Corps continued its daily operations. Recruits struggled through boot camp, students endured the challenges of various military schools, and Marines around the world carried out their missions with the same dedication that had defined the Corps for centuries. But in that small, secure room at Camp Pendleton, a quiet girl from San Antonio was about to become something the enemy would never see coming. A ghost with a rifle, operating in the shadows where America's most critical missions were planned and executed. The mocking had stopped. The doubters had been silenced. And Sarah Martinez had found her place in the most elite community of warriors the world had ever known. Her grandfather had been right about one thing. The best warriors weren't always the loudest or the biggest or the ones who fit the stereotype. Sometimes they were the quiet ones who simply showed up every day and did the work, regardless of what anyone else thought about their chances of success. And sometimes those quiet ones changed everything.